It's been a while, hasn't it? After a tournament torn apart by COVID in 2020 and a closed-door sequel in 2021 with a finale played 1 week after Super Saturday, we can finally approach the first week of February with the excitement it deserves. Sixmas is here, once again, as 5 nations prepare to find even more audacious ways to somehow lose to Wales once again. As a rugby fan, the Six Nations is the highlight of the year. Win, lose, or win through dodgy circumstances so many times, it simply can't be a coincidence. There's always a kind of magic in the air as rugby swells from an oddity to an obsession as punters pack up pubs that never show the Premiership, all going gaga for Garbisi or Doolally for Dupont. And this year, they can pack out stadiums too as fans return to provide the extra 10% that takes the tournament from rugby's oldest championship to the greatest annual international tournament in any sport. And as for the actual rugby itself, well, for those who don't follow it so closely, things have happened in this last year. 1. New trial laws have opened the game up enormously. The average points scored in an average match of average Test rugby has been between 46 and 50 for more than a decade now. But last year's Autumn Internationals, the first time the Six Nations teams have played under these new laws, the average points per game soared to 54. The highest I can find from any competition out there as far as I could find from looking. And it's looking likely this will continue into the Six Nations as almost all of the nations are more focused on their offences than UKIP candidates' Wikipedia page. And this is a particular point of interest in the very first game of the championship as Ireland take on Wales at the Aviva Stadium on Saturday. Wales v Ireland has always been rugby's equivalent of two brothers bickering on a cold wood floor, teams with similar ambitions, histories and fortunes outside of World Cup quarter-finals. As a Wales fan, England might be the team I most want to beat, but Ireland are the team I hate losing to more than any other. But this year, the two team similarities extends to their game plan. The Six Nations squabbling siblings are entering the 2022 tournament, both playing the same formation in attack. Whilst both trot out a 1-3-2-2 structure with the ball, the pair approach it very, very differently. Irish rugby has often been typified by its efficiency instead of flair, but last autumn head coach Andy Farrell weaponised their cost-effective nature into something greatly resembling exuberance, pace and flair. Think of it like this. Both teams are trying to produce pop music, but Wales are Depeche Mode and Ireland are Girls Aloud. In this passage against the All Blacks, every single phase Ireland play, they commit 2 men to the breakdown. It's their approach, their tactic, the way they attack, both committed before contact. 2 men in, 1 scrum off, 1 on the floor, 11 players on their feet ready to attack every single time. And so Ireland coordinate their attack to always have 11 runners in motion. Almost every phase they play a pre-rehearsed pattern designed to be run with 11 men. Jerusalem Sexleaf's job isn't to play anything flash, it's to identify which item from the playbook best suits now and execute it. It's consistent, it's relentless, it's simple but it's hard to stop, and it's precision engineered to create hits. Wales, on the other hand, are the arty brother. Their approach is perhaps more exciting and artistically interesting, but the lack of regulation may result in rugby far more, should we say, hit and miss? Whereas Ireland are consistent in sending 2 men into every breakdown and attacking with 11, Wales have an intricate, expansive system that rewards having as many men as possible on their feet. As such, the aim is often 1 man, 1 second rucks, recycling the ball at lightning pace. The best passages Wales have played under Wayne Pivac are amongst the best passages any team has played since the last World Cup, crafting tries such as this with Thomas Williams 2 years ago, systematically breaking Ireland down over 12 phases. It's iconic pop music that transcends taste and generations, but the problem is, playing this, should we say, let's go with artistically, has a downside. A downside demonstrated by the fact this superb score was the only point Wales scored by the time the clock turned red. To disrupt Wales' entire attack, all you need to do is disrupt 1 breakdown, 1 phase of play. It only takes 1 efficient counter-ruck to pull 2 free men into a ruck. At some point in the autumn, we saw Wales forced to commit as many as 5 men to 1 breakdown on their own ball, having been over-ambitious from the off. The more bodies in the breakdown, the fewer stood out to attack, the fewer numbers they have, and suddenly Wales' attack is a shadow of what it should be. The Welsh Six Nations will be defined by how efficiently they can clear out on their own ball, a huge worry with Josh Navidi out injured. The highs may be higher than Ireland's approach to the same tactic, but the lows are so hilariously much lower. The question now is, was last year's title Wayne Pivac achieving his answer to Violator and it's downhill from here? And can Andy Farrell deliver his chemistry-style slam dunk, paying off the promise of his incredibly consistent approach up until now? We'll get the answers on Saturday, and whoever comes out on top puts themselves in an extremely good position to challenge for the title. where they will inevitably have to overcome a young, rebuilt, refocused England team. Eddie Jones rejuvenated his England 4 years ago, bringing in the likes of Tom Curry, Henry Slade, Carl Sinclair, Jamie George, Sam Underhill, and Willie Hines. And now he's doing it again, whilst most of the headlines have gone to, oh my god, the greatest player I've ever. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that I even get to talk. I can't believe I even get to talk about him. Oh my gosh, the best rugby player that anyone's ever seen, the greatest player of all time. I can't believe he's the best. He's the actual best player anyone's ever seen. Marcus Smith. England also have a new star at the back in the form of Leicester Tiger, Freddie Stewart. Freddie Stewart is just 21 years old, but already about the most composed fullback you'll ever see. The current trend is for big units at the back, and Stewart fits that mould perfectly. Absolutely brilliant under the high ball, a huge gentleman to crash it up on the counter-attack, and surprisingly efficient in a counter-attack situation. And also, importantly for England, incredibly adaptable. This autumn, his first proper run in the first 15, Stewart showcased it all. His try against Australia speaks for itself. Timing, his run onto the shoulder of the greatest player I've ever seen, the best player in all of the world, in all of them, the best player in all of them, superbly, and fading round little piss boy perfectly to finish. But his man of the match performance in this game came down to much more than the score. With Manu Tuolangi deployed on the wing, England would slide him into the more familiar position of centre, trusting Stewart to slot into the wing role effortlessly, often without any needed communication. This became a big part of how England defended in this particular match, with Henry Slade falling out of 13 into the traditional fullback's position. Australia's kicking game is typically about finding grass, looking to get bounces and win territory, where South Africa want to hang the ball and pressure the catcher. And England adapted their backfield accordingly, with Stewart sticking back, often hanging on the wing, where South Africa hang most of the high balls. He's such a modern player, he just slots into whatever role is required of him effortlessly. This adaptable dynamic backfield was only a strength for England in the autumn, but I wonder whether a team altering their tactics with the boot could give Stewart his firmest test to date. And there's every reason to believe that test may just come on the opening game tomorrow. Under the entire Townsend regime, Scotland's attack has always been pretty stellar. Tooney is a tweaker, twisting his systems before they're found out. His attack always one step ahead of defensive trends. But in 2020, under the tutelage of Steve Tandy and the watchful eye of Chris Harris, they turned themselves into a side with also one of the best defences in the competition as well. Scotland conceded fewer tries in Tandy's 2 tournaments as defence coach so far, put together than the one immediately before he took over on its own. But last year, Scotland built their game further by adding a superb kicking game, which became arguably the strongest aspect of their play in 2021. Instead of just looking for territory or space, Scotland's aim is to manipulate the backfield to pull players out of position, and it's something Stewart and Slade will need to watch out for. We can see a perfect example here as Russell sends a kick over Daly's shoulder, pressure forcing him to hurry the reply. With Daly trapped on the touchline, May forlornly chasing back and forth, Hogg can just thump it into the opposite corner, tennis style, and over the touchline for what would nowadays be a 50-22. It takes multiple kickers with real rugby brains and massive boots to execute like this, and it only works if they vary it up. Here, Russell looks to simply split the players in the backfield, putting the ball in the middle in the hope of coaxing them infield so he can exploit some space out on the touchline later on. It's just an all-core kicking game. Throw in the brilliant box kicking of Ali Price, and Scotland may have the best boot-based game to go alongside their now staple attack and defence. And if they knit those 3 things together and add some consistency, which has been their big problem up until now, they could be looking at this, maybe whisper it, being their year. However, to move along, England aren't the only country with an exciting young team. Now, I'm going to skim over Italy a bit because I just did 20 minutes on them earlier this week, but the Italians have the youngest side in the entire Six Nations and they're full of extremely good players. The obvious calls are captain and Squid Team of the Year 2021 alumni Michele Lamaro and the best 21-year-old fly-off in the championship, Paolo Garbisi. But it's also worth keeping an eye on fullback Ange Capuzzo, who, since I made that video, has opted for Italy despite interest from France and Toulouse. And I'm curious about a few front rowers. Ion Nuclei, whose parents I can only assume are biology teachers with a cruel sense of humour, has decimated everything he's come up against at age grade level, but seeing a 20-year-old play tight head prop in the Six Nations is almost unheard of, and I'm really curious to see how he gets on at this highest level. And Italy will be doing all of this under new coach Kieran Crowley, who's essentially carved out a career making underdogs overperform. I'm not saying they'll necessarily win a game, but if they should be far more of a force, they should run a few teams far closer than they have the previous few years. And this Sunday, they'll be aiming to spring one such surprise on the favourites of both the bookies and all of us neutral supporters, France. This is Fabien Galtier, the Gold Kings' third Six Nations in charge, and after finishing second twice in a row, this year the pressure is on his country to go one better rather than out for waffles. These days, the question mark over which French team will turn up is not about the quality but the contents of their 15, with Galtier having taken quite a number of gambles the last few years, dropping the entire first 15 for tournaments at a time to blood a second string of players and turn them into international class players with experience aplenty at the top table. Whilst the likes of Antoine Dupont, Damien Penaud and Gregory Aldrit have a level of talent unmatchable by others, France now have players who can step in. Baptiste Couillard isn't Antoine, but it's nice to see the other type of scrum half France have traditionally produced. You know, a kind of petit general mould, an organiser and tactician to be a very reliable alternative. The wings boast Gabien Villiers, Teddy Thomas and informed Matthias Lebel behind Penaud, whilst France have loads of options at the back row. They've got so many good back rowers. I mean, Anthony Gelanche is superb, Francois Cross immensely underrated, and Seko Makalou is extremely fun. But if I were to put an early bet on the Six Nations Player of the Championship 2022 for this year, my money would go on whichever Scotland player gets nominated if it's public vote, but if it isn't, I would go for Cameron Woki. Woki is a player who can do it all, an all-round, all-action flanker who works as hard as he hits. The guy has a deceptive turn of pace and even produced two sublime performances in the second row, a position he'd apparently never played before in the autumn, including a blockbuster turn and a win over the bloody All Blacks. There are also opportunities in the autumn given to the likes of Peter Malvaca and Thibault Flamand, who, did you know, used to play for Loughborough University Fifths. Yeah, that hasn't come up before. That won't come up again. That's just a unique fact for you. Enjoy that. And they took this opportunity with one hand because the other was being used to ground the ball for a try. France is building a full squad of players who can compete not just for Six Nations, but for the World Cup sat just beyond this tournament. There's a number of routes France can follow the Six Nations to get closer to their ultimate goal, including just looking to build even more depth still. But the most important step is probably likely proving they can actually win a tournament. They can actually win something for the first time since 2010. Also, I didn't mention Roman Unterbach a minute ago because I don't care how good Matthew Chalobah is. Roman Unterbach is irreplaceable. He's just better than all over plays. He's just really, really good. He's the better player, the better watching France is watching him. Sorry, Antoine, but I say what I said. Because this Six Nations is where the best of the best come to play. The likes of Unterbach, Stewart, Russell, Garbisi, Jungle Cruise, Sexrot, and Nick Tompkins? Nick Tompkins are back to play on the stage they were born to adorn. It's been a while, but it needn't be any longer. Happy Sixmas, everyone. It's just around the corner. Happy Sixmas! We're actually there. It's Sixmas Eve today, right now. We're there. It's actually happening. There's obviously lots more to come. I'll be aiming, as I did the last couple of years, to cover every game, so that'll be coming in the next few weeks. Please stick with us. There's plenty more. As I mentioned, there's 20 minutes on Italy and why Italy might actually be more of a challenge this year, if nothing else. Please go and have a poke around. Go and see that. I've also, ahead of Wales Island tomorrow, done a podcast looking back on that fixture from 1987, and boy is the game come on, and do I hope it's a better game this week. That's out there for you to find. There's loads more stuff going on, and I'll see you very, very soon.